And then it starts to become something that we don't talk about and feeling like I can't do that anyway. And how many women particularly struggle to receive pleasure, to allow that without feeling or hearing all those negative messages that that we grow up with.
Absolutely. One exercise, because we do talk about sex at Marriage Boot Camp, but one of the exercises we go into is accelerators and brakes. And we also just let them know that all these things are normal. It's not one picture for everybody, right? And so when you know what your accelerators are, and it's kind of really telling as to how many couples are actually communicating about this, because we're asking lights on, accelerators or brakes, and so we're having the partners raise their hand, and they're looking at each other like, oh, really? You like lights on? Kind of like, we're like, really? How long have you guys been married? Or it's, neck kisses or music or costumes or, all these kinds of things, sex toys. And when you know what your partner's accelerators are, I mean, that's an easy way to communicate. Yes. Of just knowing, what are your accelerators and what are your brakes. And I mean, Rick and I even have these jokes where he'll do something and I'm like, whoa, brakes. Or he'll be like, oh, that's an accelerator,
I love that. And just to know that you still are able to turn your partner on, and for them to feel like and know that they do that for you, that is, I can't put a percentage on it, but it's a huge percentage of the disconnect that happens in relationship.
Yes, so much. We're blown away how much, number one, how many people don't know how to communicate, but number two, how much communication is just not happening in the relationship, period.
Yes.
So to bring that level of communication to this area that's so intimate. And one thing we say is, if you want to get to his heart, you have to respect the package. And if you want to get to her sexualness, her vagina, you've got to go through the heart. That's how we're wired as men and women.
Absolutely.
It's just that way.
What I'm finding in sessions, Christy, is that that men are able, in their brains, no shade against them, but in their brains, they're able to separate out emotional connection with their loved one and just sex possibly with somebody else, or like watching it on video or whatever. And women may pretend that they can do that, but ultimately the sex center of the brain is right next to the emotion center. If they have sex, they will become emotionally connected, even if they pretend like they're not. And they may do different things to disconnect because of that, but we are just not wired the same.
Absolutely, 100% agree. It's so true, and I think many women do try to pretend, but it's just so innately connected. We can't separate that. It's just not our makeup.
Which means the way to the sex center is to appeal to our emotions, look at our love language, go through that direction. And I don't know if you guys do I'm sure you do, any work around the way to get to your partner to turn them on, the microwave versus the slow cooker, etc.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, men can compartmentalize, just like you said. It's like, I actually kind of picture it, kind of like you'd go to the library and it's a library card, the card catalog,
yes.
And there's a drawer.
Yes.
And so they open one drawer and that's their focus,
yes.
And they
that means when we're, that's why when we can say, what are you thinking about? Well, I'm thinking about what I'm looking at. What are you talking about?
Exactly. And then, women, there's, so many things. I mean, that they can have in the space in front of them and be thinking about, 10 different things or whatever. But I think one of the biggest tools to help them, find how do you get to your partner is, for the women, one of the things we teach is it's got to be, throughout the day, kind of like you said, the slow cooker. It's got to be, in fact, I'll give you an example. We have a couple where he actually had some background in sexual, a sexual predator in his life when he was younger.
Okay.
For several years, and had, problems. And so he actually does not like to be pursued. He was pursued by his older sister for several years growing up. And so he loves the sex and he loves the connection, but he kind of recoils when she's pursuing him, right? So here's the thing. This is part of it, is that you can work out what works for you guys, and like whatever works for you is great. It doesn't have to be like everyone else. And so what we did was we came up with a signal of, they have this little hook on their kitchen pantry, and they put the flag on.
Oh my goodness.
I was just thinking of, like, raise the flag for the sopapillas kind of thing at
right.
But they put a flag on there, either one when they're signaling, hey, I'm ready for sex, right? And it's kind of a
that's brilliant,
non-threatening kind of, that's what we came up with as their signal. And so that gives either one of them the chance to know, oh, okay, this person, he wants sex or she wants sex. And so tonight that's going to be, kind of an expectation. Well, if he's totally not in the mood, he, kindly places the flag down, or she does, and they know, okay, we're not in that place. Or if it stays up, it's like all day, like kind of signals. So they start texting each other throughout the day, little, sexual innuendos or little things. And that's kind of warming up, for her. And it's getting him stimulated already, because he's like, man, this is awesome, kind of thing. And they've got younger kids. So, sex scheduling works for them, where some people it might not at this point when they have young kids that they're trying to get to bed and all that stuff. It's like, kind of like, could you give me a warning that this is happening? Because otherwise I'm probably exhausted and going to bed, right?
Well, and so it's not, it doesn't feel really romantic, but actually it can really be that way, and it allows it to happen, whereas otherwise it would not happen, because the person would be snoring by the time you even got in there to the bedroom.
Absolutely. And then what reaction is that going to bring up in the spouse that's like ready for it and the other person's snoring, right? So it really takes a lot of that tension away, and it's a very clear, even though it's silent, it's still a communication. And it's worked great for them. They've enjoyed having that. And it's kind of become, it kind of becomes an exciting thing of like, oh, the flag's up.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. It's whatever works.
It really is. It's whatever works for you guys. I mean, it doesn't have to be a certain anything that, like, oh, here's the memo on how to make that happen. It's like, what works for you guys? Because in the skills that we teach in communication, it is part of that, of what, we all have different temperaments as to what we do. I mean, some couples, even in their communication, they bring laughter in as kind of an icebreaker. For someone else, that might be like, what? You're laughing? Are you kidding me right now?
Yes.
But for them, it works. They know that laughter is something that connects them. And so to ease the tension between them, so it's really about what works for you and figuring that out through communication, what it is that works for you.
Well, and as, from working with sexual trauma, the idea of choice, the flag going up and me being able to take the flag down or put the flag up when I'm ready, that is very key.
It is. It is. It absolutely is, because when you've, had an experience when you had no choice, this really becomes very empowering of the idea that I do have a choice. And even with the brakes and the accelerators, to be vocal about it. of like, hey, that doesn't work for me, you know. But at the same time, part of when you are in partnership with someone else, there are things that you have to start to embody from them in yourself, or else it just doesn't gel, you know. So sometimes there is a compromise of, hey, that's not my thing, but if that's something you really like, I'm willing to go this far with it, right? There can even be boundaries with that.
Sure.
You know, this is where I'm willing to walk. This place over here, I'm not, but this is what I can do for you. And when there's a connection between the two of you, there's usually a bigger likelihood that things can start to happen where the bigger compromises can come into place so that you're both having needs met in, you know, in different ways. But that is one key that I do see is we do have to, you know, we're individuals, which is very important in a relationship to have the individuation, but at the same time, it's also our differences brought us together even, right? You know, opposites attract and things, but if we can start to embody some of what we love about our partner, like, say, for instance, I might not have a great sense of humor and my partner really does. If I don't start to lean that way a little more, that can cause disconnect, right? If I'm not leaning more into, well, why don't I lighten up a little and laugh a little more? Or, you know, there's just different qualities that we can start to embody with each other that actually create even more connection in the relationship together.
Well, and, you know, my understanding is your opposite is what drew you to your partner. That'll be the thing that causes you, you know, a lot of difficulty, but embracing that part of them that drew you to begin with.
Absolutely, because it's like they brought something new to you, something new for you to discover, and when you're in curiosity of the newness of it, that creates, you know, connection.
Well, and it sounds like a little bit too, Christy, of as I don't know if I've ever mentioned the book The Passionate Marriage by David Schnarch. It's based on family systems theory, which I imagine nobody cares about except for therapists. However, it talks about the holding on to oneself while being in a relationship. If you hold on to yourself, you don't get lost in the relationship, and it's just a whole connection. And I'm sure you guys get into that as well.
Absolutely. You know, I find that the clients I tend to work with very often, because, you know, this is a path I've walked myself, is here are these women who are go-getters, doers, make things happen in the world, in their jobs, in their careers, either as an executive or even an entrepreneur themselves. They are go-getters, get out there, get it done, and strong in the masculine energy, right? Yeah. To make those things happen. And yet in marriage, they tend to lose a part of themselves. And what I've actually noticed is that, well, number one, having that same masculine attitude or, you know, personality, I guess, drive in them doesn't work well in the marriage where, you know, it becomes this dominant go-getter kind of thing. But the problem they tend to have is they don't actually know how to go into the feminine in their relationship, hold on to themselves and their power, and learn to really receive. And for me, this is my own philosophy, so I'm not saying this is fact, but I tend to think that, you know, we've been raised in a patriarchal society where it's kind of been go to the men for the authority, for permission, for, you know, kind of thing. And so there's something psychologically going on within these women of them not holding on to their power. And this isn't an overbearing, like, I'm going to take over and it's all about me. It's really owning themselves, like you said, holding on to self. in this relationship and knowing how to navigate and maneuver